Thanks, Liz, for that introduction. And it's really lovely to follow on from Jess and her work. ISAQOL is a really, I don't know, just a well-respected organisation with regards to ensuring that patient data is used in the way that it is intended to be collected. And I guess I'm probably stepping forward for this presentation as a clinical researcher, and I'm by no means an expert in partnering with consumers, but I can certainly share my experiences and my sort of thoughts on the topic. Okay, there we go. This is a quote from a consumer representative. And I guess what it's sort of saying, you know, partnership can't happen without having everyone at the same table. And we've historically done research to people, not with people. And it's great that where things are moving forward in a way that that's really no longer the case. So my touch points today is I'm just going to talk a little bit about research and lived experience, my experiences of partnering with patients, families and communities, and just talk about my perspectives on the role of the Ethics Committee. So here are some definitions, and I guess that this is one of the challenges of consumer engagement is there is a lot of terminology and it can be confusing. But we're sort of settling in a space where we're all using the same language. These definitions have been kindly shared with me by Anne McKenzie from Telethon Kids Institute. They do some really fantastic training programs for researchers and also for consumer representatives to learn more about partnering in research. So I guess what these sort of highlight is that the term consumer is really a role given for someone that's part of a committee or a steering group. Carers are more families and friends providing unpaid care. A community doesn't need to be geographically close. It's just a group of people that have a common interest. Stakeholders are people that have an interest in the service or the research taking place. Participation is referring to people that take part in a research project. And involvement is where you work in partnership with researchers and consumer or community members. Whereas engagement, I'm just playing around with my screen, I apologise, just give me a second, is promoting those respectful conversations. And so I guess there are lots of ways that we can measure and capture the voice of patient experience in our research. Qualitatively, we can do that through surveys, interviews and focus groups, and storytelling. I have a wonderful colleague, Sandra Zielinski, who I partner with on the ISAQOL PEC, who does some amazing work with digital storytelling for sharing the voice of patients and communities. And then from a quantitative perspective, and Jess certainly has gone into this with great detail using patient-reported outcomes and also patient-reported experience measures. And the NHMRC has a number of documents that are available that you can sort of refer to. And the reason I put this document here is it really acknowledges that idea of considering the impact of research. I certainly have witnessed the impacts where researchers can go in, they can do research, they can collect data, and then they leave again. And the people that were involved in that research sort of sit there a little bit shell-shocked, saying what just happened there. And so it's a really good way to consider what the impact of your research is. And it's I think it's a very important global perspective to have at all time points of the research development trajectory. And this is a slide shared from Danielle Lavalley. Canada is doing some really great work creating some guidance and infrastructure with regards to partnering with consumers. And I'll just go into a little bit more detail about their definitions on the next slide. When we talk about we, what do we mean? Well, patient engagement covers many areas in healthcare and healthcare research. So research itself shouldn't be really siloed away to the side. It's a part of that big picture of healthcare. And I guess it's important to acknowledge the lived experience as a critical perspective, and that those perspectives can bring expertise to a research team. And also partnership means that there is meaningful and active collaboration in governance, priority setting and conducting the research, and then translating that research back into routine care. And so so the NHMRC has some documents and guidance that we can all lean on, and and it is a really detailed, useful document, and it really just highlights that point again, that consumer and community involvement is doing it with consumers and community members, not to them or about them. And looking at our national safety and quality healthcare standards for our accreditation in our hospitals, it's also an expectation that we'll be partnering with consumers. So even if a proposal is put forward and it's exempt from ethical review, there's still that expectation that we'll be partnering with consumers for quality improvement work as well. And I have to thank Anne McKenzie again for this slide. And this is just really highlighting the continuum and the layers of consumer and community involvement. So we've got the first piece of the puzzle, which is where we inform consumers or community about the research. We provide information that is informative and it's understandable. Then there's the next piece of the puzzle where we look at consultation, where we consult with patients and consumers, community, and we seek their views and incorporate those views. And then there's advise, where patients and consumer representatives come on board in an advisory role. And then the next piece of the puzzle is when we do that in partnership. And then the final piece of the puzzle, I'm getting my words twisted, is where our consumer representatives lead the research. And I've been very lucky to be involved in that type of research as well. And one more slide of definitions, but it's a very useful slide to understand the many dimensions of consumer engagement in research. And I have to thank Anne McKenzie again from Telethon Kids for this slide. So I guess, if you're looking at involving two or more consumers in your research, there are different definitions. So the consumer representative, that's a formal role on a research project involved with decision making, whereas a research buddy is a less formal way of getting a community perspective, someone to soundboard and share ideas with in an informal collaboration. And then when you've got a consumer or community researcher, that's where they take on a professional role as a professional researcher as part of the team. And then you can look at larger groups, such as advisory groups, where you might have, say, a reference group, and they would provide advice and informed decision-making around a specific project. But then you might have a steering group or an advisory council, which we have recently set up in our Centre for Research Excellence, where that group comes together and they guide the direction of the research. They identify what the needs are in the community with the research, and they guide the direction that the research programs go in. And then while involving the wider community, so we've got community conversations where you've got a large number of people that come together, and you seek that community and wider consumer views and output. So I'm just fiddling around with my screen. And then you've got priority setting partnerships where you seek information so that you get really clear priorities for the future. I know Leonie will probably speak to this, but there's a breast cancer trials group really does an amazing job with that, partnering with consumers in community. And I just sort of wanted to acknowledge that as we understand more and more of the value of consumer and community engagement, and our regulatory bodies have really stepped up with regards to clinical trials and formalised what that would look like. I don't think ICH GCP have got their final documents in place for this just yet, but certainly the European agencies have, and it's really talking to moving away from that idea of research subjects, changing that terminology to be about research partnership. And it's about providing information, because it's acknowledging that people are autonomous. They can make their own decisions about what research they participate in, and it's about enabling shared decision making and understanding treatment options. Okay, sorry, I've been at the Brisbane Cancer Conference today, so I'm working off my laptop. And you know, the NHMRC have got a framework for effective consumer and community engagement and research, and it addresses that that trajectory on the research continuum. So things to consider with patient engagement and research, and I acknowledge there are a lot of things on this screen, and as Gordon would say, there's the nice to haves and the have to haves, and at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you're transparent with the things that you have been able to include, and acknowledge the limitations of your research as well. You know, this is very detailed. Sandra has lent me her slide sort of explaining these, but it's important to at least have these 4 pillars where you've got co-building and you've got mutual respect, you've got supports in place, and you ensure that there's equity in the way that you conduct your research. And so, and it's always good to evaluate what you do. I'm a big fan of evaluation, and just looking at what the level of engagement is, and seeing if you can just push yourself that step further, and ensuring that that engagement is actually genuine and it's actually in place. It's not just a tick box, and understanding the characteristics of your patient partners, understanding what your timeframes look like for partnership. And I know Leonie will probably speak to this, but the importance of everyone being sitting at the table and being paid for their time at the table, and also being aware and meeting funder expectations. And so if we look to the responsibilities of an ethics committee, these are what we use to evaluate research studies in our ethics committee. So obviously, if you're looking at consumer engagement and you want to address research merit and integrity, yeah, if that lens and that perspective is not an integral part of the research, there is limitations with the research integrity and research method. the research merit, sorry, and that you've got a team that's experienced enough to conduct the study. And I guess that there has to be that training, which is very, very accessible for consumer representatives through Telethon Kids and other resources. I'm very happy to share those if people want to contact me. And then there's the justice side of things, and I guess the main thing with justice is that, that there's equity and equality. And then from the beneficence point of view, what you really want to do is promote well-being with beneficence, and the consumer voice is a good opportunity to identify what those risks are and what those benefits are for patients and families. And of course, then we go to respect and communicating information through an informed consent process, ensuring that privacy and confidentiality is protected. There are many frameworks or principles that a lot of community groups have in place so that they own their own data. I know that that RAW, which is the collaborative of Indigenous community groups here in Brisbane, have developed their own data management guidance so that they will always own their own data, irrespective of who's leading the research. And then there's some further resources for the NHMRC guidance. The Patient-Centred Outcomes Research Institute has some amazing resources. They've been leading the way in the space for decades, and then from our Canadian colleagues as well. And I just wanted to, so everything I'm telling you, I've been told by great consumer representatives that have been partnering with me for years. So I just wanted to thank Helene Jacquemont. I think Helene might be in the meeting. And Gary Power, Jacinta Smith, Anita McGrath, they all worked very closely with me through my PhD and subsequently through postdoctoral studies. Leona Young, who's here, Sandra, who sits co-chairs with me, she's Canadian, with the Isoquol group. Julie Vermeer, who's a carer, her husband had an accident and ended up in ICU, so she's excellent with that carer perspective. Anya Christopherson, Shanna London, Colin O'Brien, who's leading his own research project through ANZUP, our National Genitourinary Cancers Clinical Trials Group, and Alistair McKendrick, who has sadly passed away, but sat next to me through many, many meetings and looked after me. And to all the non-identifiable or de-identified patients, families and communities who have generally contributed their insights and experiences. That's me done.